The Crown Prosecution Service will start recording the ethnicity of people charged under the controversial joint enterprise legislation following a legal challenge that it unfairly targets black men and boys.
While campaigners have claimed the law is discriminatory, the push to remove it may endanger the lives of those living in areas blighted by gang-related violent crime. We're now joined by Rory Geoghegan, the director of the Public Safety Foundation. So these new rules, what's going to be the consequences of them, this research they're doing now?
Well, good morning, Esther and Philip. Thanks for having me on. I think the first thing to say is obviously there's nothing wrong with anyone wanting to understand how our police or criminal justice system works. Indeed, I think at the moment a lot of people are wondering if it even works at all. Just look at the Just Stop Oil type stuff, for instance. But I think what we've seen, and we've seen this before with Stop and Search, what we've seen is that gathering data on ethnicity, which is this latest development in terms of the joint enterprise stuff, on its own does little or nothing to advance understanding or improve public safety. We're in an era today of identity politics. The data will inevitably be used, or misused, should I say, to suggest that the only explanation and the only possible explanation, the only acceptable explanation is one of racial discrimination. And of course, we see it with, various other things, Stop and Search, where people are more familiar with stats like, being stopped and searched if you're, black, being 5 or 6, 7, 8 times more likely. But the more sort of compelling stat, arguably, the one of being 8 times more likely to be the victim of a homicide on our streets if you're black than if you're white in London, that doesn't get the airtime. So I think the short version from this latest news is that essentially the data will be published and it will basically be copy and pasted into various news outlets who will then use it to attack the Crown Prosecution Service, attack the police for prosecuting too many black people. Never mind the fact that, of course, the police and the prosecutors have to deal with crime as it presents itself. They don't really have that much discretion, shall we say, over victims of homicide in particular. And joint enterprise, as anyone familiar with it would know, has been used successfully in cases, high-profile ones going back years. Ben Kinsella, Stephen Lawrence, Gary Newlove, just to name but a few. And so this sort of regular onslaught against our criminal justice system and our police and those men and women who are determined to sort of try and keep our streets safe, I don't think it shows any signs of ending.
Rory, I mean, people have sort of criticisms of joint enterprise generally in the sense that they say, well, how can it be fair that you're charged with murder even if you didn't commit the fatal act yourself, or that it convicts innocent people who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time but are scared of implicating the people who were responsible. What would you say to people who have those criticisms of joint enterprise generally?
Well, look, the law will always evolve over time, and there was a Supreme Court judgment not so long ago that sort of clarified and suggested there'd been a misinterpretation. I think it's only common sense, really, when you think about, if you have 2 or 3 men or women kicking someone to death on the street and you have a number of individuals with them, egging them on, encouraging them, determined to encourage them to continue to essentially murder that person. I think it's perfectly common sense to suggest that those individuals should be held to account for their actions. And this principle of, essentially dealing with people in as much a preventative sense as anything, we see that with other offences too. We see it with things like going equipped to steal. We see it with things like conspiracy. We see it with a whole range of offences that seek to send a very clear signal that this sort of conduct, this sort of criminal conduct, is unacceptable. So the law may evolve over time. I don't have a problem with the law evolving, but it's vital we keep the streets safe.
Rory Geoghegan, thank you so much indeed for joining us this morning to talk about joint enterprise.